Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I am joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian, and I'm not your lover. I'm not your friend. I am something that you'll never comprehend.
That is so true. I've been trying for years to comprehend.
Have you made any progress? Or
I really haven't, but we'll keep on trying. So this is a very special bonus episode that we are adding on to our season on the films of 1984. We concluded the season, but we decided to add one more film to the list. In part, I guess, or even mainly because the sort of central theme of this season has been music and how important music is to so many of the movies that we talked about and so many movies in this year. And so looking at that, we decided we couldn't leave 1984 without discussing maybe the, I don't know, most important or the most music-y music movie of the year.
I think what you're saying is...
What am I saying, Jason?
What you're saying is of all the movies we've covered, the music is as essential to this one to propelling it to the heights that it gained or received or reached, both story-wise and acclaim-wise and box office-wise. Is that what you're saying? That the music is so woven into the tapestry of this film that it's almost like a hour and 51-minute music video? Is that what you're saying? So
let's say that is what I'm saying, because that sounds better than whatever I would have said. So.
I mean, there's no movie without the music. And we know we've done Footloose and Amadeus, and those are essential. So this is our pop counterpart to Amadeus in a way.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And this movie is Purple Rain, the showcase for Prince, who was a huge star in 1984, and perhaps more importantly, became an even huger star thanks to this movie. This was a major turning point in Prince's career, not only as a successful film, but also the music from this movie. The soundtrack album was a massive, massive hit for Prince as a musical artist. And it really feels I think it feels, as much as any of the other big blockbuster movies that we discussed, it feels like a very quintessential 1984 movie.
Yeah, this was in the zeitgeist. And I think you're right, Josh. He was a big star. And then once MTV started playing him, the momentum, his videos, the momentum kind of took off. And then this just pushed it to a level of pandemonium and superstardom, the likes of which, I think we talked about it in another episode. There were 5 in 1984. It was Michael Jackson, Prince, Bruce Springsteen, Madonna, and Cyndi Lauper. Those were like the hugest stars that there were,
Right. And that put him on the level with those other people. And so this movie was a big success at the box office, despite, as I think, along with a few other things that we've talked about this season that were huge hits, where the studio executives looked at these movies and thought, what? And were reluctant to even release them. This movie grossed $70.3 million on its budget of just $7.2 million. It also won an Oscar, and this was interesting to me. It won an Oscar for Best Song Score, which is a separate category from Best Original Score. And it was the last movie to ever win that award. After 1984, that award was discontinued. So that...
Can you explain that Oscar, Josh?
No. That was why I was sort of... No, as far as I could tell, it was an award that was given to Prince for the original songs. And I think it was an award that was designed back when original musicals, when Hollywood was producing so many more musicals every year. And so in addition to the sort of instrumental score in a film, they would want to give an award to a body of songs that were written, not just one song, but the overall body of songs. And I think probably in part because there are so few movies like that anymore that there wasn't enough to nominate. I don't know exactly why that was discontinued. But what it was an award that went to Prince, not just for one song, but for all the songs in the film.
And in 1984, we know had so many movies with so many original songs. Was he against anything, or was it?
He was, and now I should have noted that down because I don't know. Maybe Dave can look it up quickly because it's somewhere in the weeds of Wikipedia. But yeah, there were two other nominees. So not as many as in most categories when you end up with 5, but just like these days in some of the categories where there isn't as much to nominate. Sometimes even in Best Original Song these days, there'll only be 3 nominees.
Right.
Yeah, here we go. Okay, I found it. So he was up against one of your favorites, Jason, The Muppets Take Manhattan, and Jeff Moss, who I guess wrote the songs for that movie, and the movie Songwriter, which was starring and featuring original songs by Chris Christopherson. So there you go. I'm not familiar with that movie, but that is an interesting award, and I feel like it could maybe be given out now.
A Star is Born, right? That's what came to my mind. The Lady Gaga Star is Born.
I was going to say Once from 2007.
There you go. And I wonder if it has to be, because a lot of times, even now, movies that have a bunch of songs and where there's a whole body of songs that contribute, they're maybe not all written by the same person. And I don't know if that's a necessary component too. Could you nominate like 10 different people if they all contributed different songs? I don't know how that worked exactly, but for whatever reason, it's not been given out since 1984, and Prince was the last guy who got it. The soundtrack, as we're saying, which was a huge turning point for Prince, has sold 25 million copies worldwide, which is a large number. And I don't know.
Good analysis, Josh.
Thank you. Well, hey, I pulled out some random stuff to say about the Best Original Song Score Award. So come on, give me some credit. And I don't know if this has been the case with anything that we've talked about before, but this movie won an Oscar and was nominated for 2 Razzies, for Worst New Star for Apollonia Kotero, and for Worst Original Song for the song Sex Shooter, which is a song that Apollonia and her group sing in this film, but they did not win.
I don't mind her being nominated. Like, that's fair, but Sex Shooter? Come on, there are worse songs out there than Sex Shooter. So.
I'm sure there are. I don't know what exactly that I also don't know what it was up against there, and I don't think Worst Original Song is a category that the Razzies give out very often. But
they just wanted to pick on Apollonia.
I mean, that's possible, and that's something, as we've talked about too, that the Razzies will do. They'll just like make up random categories in any particular year because they want to pile on some movie that they hated.
Well, Josh, as we know, the Razzies that year, the jury was headed by Vanity. So,
yeah, that's a reference. Right
that's an inside Purple Rain joke there. Vanity was originally supposed to be the star, the Vanity 6, and then she and Prince kind of broke up. I think they were an item. And then it was going to be Jennifer Beals, but she was in school, so it went to Apollonia, who Prince saw on a random TV show. And was like, hey, that's the lady. She'll be the star,
Yeah.
So it was called Tales of the Gold Monkey.
I feel like I watched Tales of the Gold Monkey as a kid. It was like a old school, like adventure kind of show, but I could be making that up entirely. But does it really matter? This movie it got mixed response from critics. And I think as we've talked about, actually probably a lot in this season with youth-oriented films, often the stodgy critics are baffled by what the kids today are into. But some critics did like it. Siskel and Ebert actually both really liked it. They gave it 2 thumbs up, and they talked about how Prince was, this would have been a launch for his film career, which, as we discussed when they talked about that with Michael Jordan in Space Jam, of course, that was not really true, and they were pretty off base on it. But they did like the movie, and they gave it 2 thumbs up. Review-wise, Cynthia Kirk in Variety was also positive, and in the typically amusingly jargon-filled Variety style, she said, playing a character rooted in his own background and surrounded by the real-life members of his Minneapolis-based musical family, rock star Prince makes an impressive feature film debut in Purple Rain, a rousing contemporary addition to the classic backstage musical genre. Pick captures the essence of the current music scene and the colorful Prince persona very well indeed. Fans of the performer, who went triple platinum with his last LP and is already charted with his first single from the film's soundtrack album, will be mightily pleased. Well-shot musical sequences, doubtless intended for additional music vid, cable, and TV exposure, should enhance the pic's drawing power. And I don't know for sure, but I assume some sequences from this were taken basically entirely and used as music videos on MTV.
I'm almost certain like the When Doves Cry video is basically the same thing because I remember it in my mind. The director of photography, Don Thorin, who, was a very successful DP, definitely, man, the word that popped in that review was colorful to me because they really played with colors and backgrounds. And the last thing I wanted to say, Josh, Siskel had it at number 5 of his favorite movies of 1984. And Ebert had it at number 10. And as we know, they both dressed up as Prince at the end of the year to celebrate that.
Yeah, that's kind of amazing that they both had it on their top 10 lists, that not only were they enthused about it as sort of a fun music movie, but they really thought that it had that much cinematic value, especially given, as we talked about in a recent episode, their response to Footloose, where they were very disdainful of exactly the kind of stuff that Cynthia Kirk is talking about in that Variety review, the idea of these sequences that are essentially just music videos on their own. And they were very dismissive of that related to Footloose, but I guess they loved Prince. And of course, also, as we've talked about before, Roger Ebert, very horny, and definitely got in his mention of how attractive he found Apollonia.
Well, so. Josh, I mean, Siskel could have also been very horny. We don't know either way, really. So.
That is true. That is true. Ebert, however, was always unashamed to express.
She is beautiful. Sadly for her, she's like the second most beautiful star of the movie behind Prince. So Prince seduces you with his eyes every time he's on screen. So
yeah, he has that going for him. Other critics were not so much into it, and this one, as I feel like we've established in other episodes, Gary Arnold in the Washington Post is quite the curmudgeon, and he definitely does not get the appeal of Prince. He said, evidently a thinly fictionalized elaboration of the star's private mythology, the movie drapes a dozen glittery music video production numbers around a maudlin plot depicting the, quote, catharsis of an egotistic rock idol called The Kid. But it's catharsis on the cheap. There's no reason to accept the pretense that the hero has suffered much and changed for the better, unless you're predisposed to get swoony over Prince himself. And that is a difficult proposition for someone of my generation and tastes, since he resembles nothing so much as Donna Summer with a goofy mustache, and stirs a nostalgic fondness for James Brown and Little Richard, who used to go through similar motions in a consciously humorous style. And he goes on and on in that review about how dumb he finds Prince, which I thought was amusing.
Was he like insulting? I mean, obviously he's insulting Prince, but was he insulting? Like, it felt like a very insulting comparison to Little Richard and James Brown. Like, here are other legends who also suck, like that.
No. I think what he's saying is that James Brown and Little Richard are better at doing what Prince is doing, and that they had this sense of humor about themselves that Prince does not have, I think is what he's kind of trying to say there.
I think Prince's sense of humor, as we saw throughout the years, was because he took himself so seriously, right? And he knew he took himself so seriously. And that's when he was able to poke fun of himself here and there a little, A
little. Definitely not in this movie, though. He takes himself, and the movie takes him incredibly seriously here.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he did that later. You're absolutely right, when he would make like little cameos and stuff, and had a sense of self-awareness about how silly he was. But none of that comes across in this movie.
Yeah, maybe not for Gary Arnold, but for the audiences in 1984, that didn't really bother them.
No, it didn't. I mean, the people who were into this movie, who were Prince fans, also presumably took him seriously and were happy to see him celebrate himself.
I mean, Dave always talks about, imagine, and this is the real season of vindication for the big screen experience, right? But like, it would be totally the best way to see this movie on a big screen with Prince fans in a dressed up, type of all night party there. That would be the way. Let's go crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a movie that would certainly be enhanced by being surrounded by people who were fans of Prince and fans of the music, because that's all there is to it. So finally, Pauline Kael in The New Yorker was also sort of baffled by Prince, but was a little more amused by the whole experience. She said, "It's not difficult to see the attraction that the picture has for adolescents. Prince's songs are a cry for the free expression of sexual energy, and his suffering is a supercharged version of what made James Dean the idol of young moviegoers. This kid is, quote, hurting. And this picture knows no restraint. It was directed by Albert Magnoli, who also wrote the final script and was the co-editor. But Prince is in charge, and he knows how he wants to appear, like Dionysus crossed with a convent girl on her first bender. And his instinct is right. If he had performed the role more realistically, the picture would be really sodden. This way, his impudent pranks make the audience laugh, and his musical numbers keep giving the picture a lift. It's pretty terrible. There are no real scenes, just flashy, fractured rock video moments, but those willing to accept Prince as a sexual messiah aren't likely to mind."
Josh, you were an English major in college, correct?
Yes.
Will you break down that simile for us that she used?
I don't know exactly. I mean, I love her, right? Like her writing is always great. And I feel like Dionysus, of course, is a Greek or Roman god of like partying and excess.
Yeah. And
so,
sex is a big component of that.
Yes. And the convent girl on her first bender. So I think she's trying to say that he wants to seem both hedonistic and sort of like strangely innocent at the same time, and like naive in some ways. And I think that makes sense.
I do too.
Because the kid is sort of, I mean, he's a kid in a way. I mean, I think that's probably deliberate in the way that he's been named. And even though he's very sexual and he's this budding rock star and all that stuff, he's still weirdly sheltered and naive about human emotions and his parents and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, it's like, what age are we trying to make him here? I think he was 26 at the time of filming or when it came out, but it's like he's still living with his parents, right? And his career is like, until that catharsis that was talked about earlier, like on the rocks. Like, we don't know how he's living this lifestyle other than the fact that he is a musician in the scene. But it's like we never see him get money, but he's got this dope purple motorcycle and all these cool clothes, so, and he's able to pay his band. So I don't know, I agree. I think it's dichotomy, but I think it was done on purpose to attract the largest possible audience.
Yeah, probably so. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt on that. Yeah, you could say that this is, I mean, it's not meant to be realistic, this movie. I suppose it's like a fable, even though it takes on these very heavy themes that I think are at odds with the idea of it being sort of like a fairy tale almost. But right, I don't think we're meant to question like, what does the kid do for money and why does he live with his parents and did he go to college and that kind of stuff. I don't think that's really something they're concerned with.
I mean, it's in a way, it's a matter of execution, right? Because we could ask a lot of these same questions about Amadeus, but we all fell in love with Amadeus so much we were like, just let it go.
I suppose you're right that it's stylized in a way, and if the movie works for you, you're not concerned about that. And this movie did not work on any level for me, so it makes me wonder these things. And I feel like that's maybe the case for these critics who are also not really into it, and they start asking those questions, as opposed to like Siskel and Ebert, who were just so enamored of the whole thing that they didn't worry about that. They just talked about how hot Apollonia was. Had you seen this movie before, Jason?
I actually had never seen it before, Josh.
Okay, because I know you like Prince a lot.
I love Prince, so that is. But yeah, I'd never seen any Prince movies before.
Well, this is the one to see, I think. Really, we'll talk
really?
about later. Yeah, really.
There's a lot of Graffiti Bridge fans that you're going to piss off, Josh.
There are some, I think, probably. And I actually had seen this. I'm not a Prince fan, as Jason knows. And Jason, did we see Prince live together? This is, as we were talking about yesterday, my poor memory. I saw Prince live. Were you there?
We did. I had to. So Josh remembers us hanging out, but he never remembers the things that we did. Josh covered Prince on for a magazine article for a Tiger Jam where he was headlining.
Oh yeah,
and it was between me and our friend Jamie Berger, who you were going to take, and I bribed you by saying I'd treat you to In-N-Out Burger.
That's all it takes, really.
And that was one of the great investments of my life, Dave, because I don't know if you've seen Prince live, but, it was like he's headlining a charity show. So, as Prince, it wasn't like a small club 2 a.m. Prince show where you're like, oh, I don't know what he's doing. These are all random riffs on song, like, South African funk songs from the 60s that we don't know or anything like that. These were all the greatest hits back to back to back to back to back to back to back, which was a great way to see him. Did you ever see him, Dave?
I got to see him at the Rio when he did that little residency, and it was great.
And that was like when he used to just do whatever he wanted.
Yeah, exactly. It was like his own little thing, and he'd mix in, of course, some hits, but it was just randomness, though.
Did you like the show we saw, Josh?
No, I did not. And I don't like Prince, his music particularly. There's some songs that I think are like enjoyable. I think, as we talked about with the Talking Heads, when we talked about Stop Making Sense, some of the biggest pop hits I enjoy in sort of this ambient, you've got to be familiar with them kind of way. And that's true probably for Prince too. In this movie, I would say When Doves Cry is the one song in this movie that I quite enjoy. But overall, I'm not into Prince's music. But the other thing about that concert, and probably even more so, Dave, for the show that you saw, was that he never played a whole damn song. He's so into like jamming and like melding things together that even though he did, as Jason says, play all these big hits because it was this charity show, like he never played one all the way through, and they all just kind of ran together.
He did play one all the way through.
Or did he play? Which one did he play?
He closed with Purple Rain.
Okay, which is like 10 minutes long, and I also hate that, as we've established
previously.
I hate jamming. I can't stand jamming. Even if I go see an artist that I love, and they're like, "Here's this song, but we're gonna play it for 10 minutes," forget it.
But wait a second, I'm gonna take you to task on this one.
Yeah,
because Purple Rain, the original cut of it is like, depending on what you want to say, is anywhere from 8 to 13 minutes, right? So the released version that you heard, when you were rocking the radio in like 84, 85, Josh, is a 4 to 5 minute cut down version, but the real track is 8 to 13 minutes. So he's not jamming on it. He's playing the full version of the song.
Well, first of all, that sucks. But secondly, but also I can't be 100% sure. It was a long time ago. As we've established, my memory apparently is gone now in my middle-aged years. But I guarantee you he played it longer than that because that's what he does in concert.
Yeah.
And so, no, I'm not into that at all. And I'm sure that like you were far from the only one at that concert who enjoyed that. And obviously people are really into when that happens. But even the version in this movie, which is, I don't remember exactly how long they play it, but however long.
About 8 to 10, I think.
I was sitting there thinking, when is this going to be over? Why is this song still going? So it's just, it's not for me. I can acknowledge that Prince is a very talented musician. Obviously people love a lot of his music, but to me, it just doesn't do anything for me music wise, even less so, I would say, than like the Talking Heads, where we watched a whole movie of their concert. And thankfully I could be kind of into it. So that's just my reaction to his music. And I think going to see him in concert, and maybe you and I talked about this, it was like, well, this experience maybe, will show you'll be able to appreciate the music. And I just didn't. So,
I mean, you appreciated the In-N-Out Burger.
I did way more than the concert, I'm sure. So I would have preferred to just end the evening there with the In-N-Out Burger.
So to be clear, I am a Prince fan, but not like a super hardcore Prince fan. But I thought he was I actually rank him as the second best concert I've ever seen. The one that we saw behind the 50 Bruce Springsteen
Right.
concerts.
Yeah, they're all tied for number one.
But in my defense, they asked Prince once on like a talk show, and they're like, "You're such a commanding, performer. Is there any other rock musician you like to watch?" And he said, "I think Bruce Springsteen's a very good band leader." So there was a mutual respect for the two of them there. And Bruce was actually on the Purple Rain tour. I think there were like videos of like pop stars like talking about how great Prince was, and Springsteen was one of them. So I love the music. I want to say this about the concert. What mesmerized me so much, and I agree with you that the medley where he would like play kind of some of the hits and just tease you, like just give it to me, baby. I'm ready to finish and have a cigarette. But and I don't even smoke. But he was the only musician, and as you know, I covered music for about a decade, I've ever seen who was ahead of the music he was playing. Usually someone has to like play a note and their hand has to stay where, the note is, so to speak, on the guitar. And his hand was already somewhere else when the note was coming out. And I've never seen that before or since. Definitely, as we all know, one of the greatest musicians out there and one of the most electric guitar players I've ever seen.
Yeah, certainly. Again, I'm not saying he's not extremely talented. It's just that his talents are lost on me. So, Dave, I'm guessing that you are a Prince fan, having gone to that show. Did you see this movie before?
Actually, I never have been too big of a Prince fan. I got invited to that show for free, and I think he's fine. I'm kind of, I like some of the hits, and I think he's an amazing performer and musician, but I'm not really big on his songs, so to speak. But I hadn't seen the movie though. That I'll say.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, let me give you a little more background on the
Go for it.
the film,
yes,
Josh,
please.
Okay.
I'll stop insulting Prince.
Yeah, let's get back to this film, Purple Rain. So Prince told his managers in like 1983, "If you don't get me a studio deal, I'm leaving you." And his managers basically couldn't get him a studio deal for a motion picture with his name above the marquee. So they financed it himself. That was the risk they took on him. It worked. The movie was originally supposed to go to James Foley from At Close Range. At this time, he had just debuted with Reckless, and he couldn't do it, so he passed it to Magnoli, who you had mentioned, Josh, who was his editor at the time. There was a script written by William Blinn called Dreams, and that didn't really... He stayed on as like a credited writer, but he didn't... They went a totally different way from that. And Prince kind of had the idea for this movie and wrote it down in like purple notebooks or a purple notebook, what it was supposed to be and the themes. And that's kind of how it all worked. Obviously, 2 Grammys for it: Best Rock Performance by a Duo or a Group with a Vocal, Best Instrumental Composition Written for a Movie. And the last thing I wanted to say from a background standpoint, Josh, is you want to talk about how big of a star he was when this was out. At one point in time, he had the #1 movie, the #1 album, and the #1 single in America all at the same time.
Yeah, I don't know who else would do that. Maybe Elvis.
Yeah, I don't know either. I'm trying to think when we said A Star Is Born, did that happen, or who knows? But
yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there's we could
Barbra Streisand, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, even if so, that's got to be a very, very short list. So impressive accomplishments. And as Pauline Kael pointed out, as you're saying, Albert Magnoli may be the credited director and co-writer here, but this is clearly Prince's. He's clearly in charge of what goes on here.
Right. And I think later on, Magnoli did more quote unquote ghost directing for him, but Prince made sure to keep the credit.
Yes. Well, that sounds like something Prince would do. So
Sign of the Time. I think in the Sign of the Time concerts. Yeah.
We'll come back then in a moment and talk about our general thoughts on Purple Rain. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this special bonus episode of our season on the films of 1984, we're talking about Prince's Purple Rain. And as previously established, I hate Prince. So, Jason, why don't you start? Why? I mean, I assume, first of all, did you enjoy this movie?
I thought it was all right.
Oh, okay. Well, never mind. My setup has failed.
No, I mean, look, And by the way, I just want to say I consider you two my Wendy and Lisa. So, that's how fond I
Thanks.
am of you.
Nice.
And also, I'll never take your creative input on anything. No, that's not the case. I wanted to like it more, Josh. I wanted to like it so much more, but it's not really a movie. It's like I said, an extended music video. And the good parts are the music. So like when it's not there, you're like, come on, man. Come on, dude. Come on. And then like the part where it gets great is the part you hated, where it crescendos with Purple Rain and I Would Die for You and Baby I'm a Star. And that's like the release and the celebration. And I love that last 20 minutes of it. But I could see if you weren't invested that you wouldn't care by that point in time.
Well, right. And I mean, I didn't particularly care for that part, but I certainly preferred the parts where they were just playing music to the parts where Prince is attempting to act and they're trying to have a plot. Those parts are way worse. And I mean, and I think that's the problem. It's not just that like the music is the only good part. It's that the other parts are so bad that they almost make it worse. That even if you enjoy the music and you like Prince and you want to see him perform some songs, you have to like slog your way through this just dreadful movie in order to get there. I guarantee there's got to be some video of a Prince concert from around this time where you could see him perform all these songs and you wouldn't have to deal with the plot and the acting of Purple Rain.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that, Josh, because in 1983, they played at the First Avenue Club, right, where this movie takes place, or where the club scenes are shot. And it was the first performance ever with the Revolution and Wendy and Lisa. It was a fundraiser for the Minnesota Dance Theater. And there's a video of the performance on YouTube. It's not very good quality, but it's the first time they ever played Purple Rain. Like I said, the first time they played as the Revolution and the first time they ever played Purple Rain. And that's where the album track is taken from. They recorded it like once live and they're like, yeah, that's it. We nailed it. So you do have that option, Josh.
Right. And I personally don't want to take it because I, as established, don't like the music. But I'm sure you're right that this is much more professionally shot. But I think there is at least an officially released concert movie of the Purple Rain tour. Yeah. I was looking at this. So that would be after this movie came out. But, you know, in terms of your option right now, if you're like, I love Prince and I want to see him perform these songs, you could watch that and not have to deal with the story, which if we want to explain the plot of this movie, the kid, which is Prince's character, is this sort of up and coming musician in Minneapolis who has this rivalry with Morris Day, played by Morris Day.
Wait, 1 second, Josh. I don't even want to say up and coming because he's already on the downslope when we're starting this.
I suppose so. Yeah. Well, he's not necessarily on the downslope. He just has a lot of people who are out to get him.
He's out of favor, and his music hasn't connected the way that he thinks it should.
Right. But he still draws a crowd at this club. It's just that he is an asshole. And so that is hampering his career development. So Morris Day, who is also kind of an asshole, but is more charming, I guess, is his big rival with his group at the time, which of course was the real Morris Day group. And Morris Day and Prince were childhood friends and played music together throughout their careers. And they then end up kind of fighting over Apollonia, who is this newcomer to town who shows up at the club and wants to be a singer. And both of them want to sleep with her. And Morris at least pretends to care about her career and tries to give her a shot in his girl group that he's putting together. But the kid, he appears to want her to fail, I think, even though he is into her romantically, I guess. He gets mad at her, not only for joining the group that is headed up by his rival, but really seemingly for making any effort whatsoever to succeed as a singer. So,
but he's the good guy, right?
Yeah, I guess that's the problem. I think that's part of the problem with this movie is that the kid is a terrible person. He is extremely unlikable. He is a total jerk and physically abusive to Apollonia, his girlfriend, and mean to his band members, arrogant. And yet the movie excuses all that because he's a musical genius, and he is a musical genius because he's Prince, and never redeems him. He never learns anything. And the plot part of the movie just kind of ends. And then they're like, here's some songs, the end.
Well, let me take two things there. He is kind of redeemed when they play Purple Rain, because at that point he's accepted Wendy and Lisa's song, which he has been
grudgingly.
The whole time. No, I mean, and then it becomes a big hit. But the other thing I'm glad you brought it up, Josh, because this is the third movie we've covered where like the movie's over, but it just keeps going with songs from 1984, right? Like Streets of Fire ended, and then they did like 10 more songs or 10 more minutes of songs. Footloose ended, and it was like 10 minutes of dancing, right? And now this was like, I think it really ends with the Purple Rain number, and then the last two, I Would Die for You and Baby I'm a Star, are just there because it's like, they're great. They're great music. They're great songs. And like, why not? Let's watch them. So, but are they necessary from a plot standpoint? No, not at all.
No, I mean, and it's not even, the problem isn't necessarily that they do that at the end. The problem is that they give up on even attempting to resolve the plot. It's not like, okay, we've resolved the conflict. The plot is over. Now we're going to celebrate by performing some music. The plot just kind of gives up. And there's almost like a montage within, I don't know if it's when they're playing Purple Rain or one of those later songs, where you get these glimpses of the kid and Apollonia sort of reconciling, I guess. But even though nothing has changed. I think it's
Purple Rain and him going to visit his dad in the hospital and all that stuff, and his mom being there. I think it is during Purple Rain.
Right. But that stuff, even though it's this sort of token nod to like, hey, remember the characters and the story, here's some of that. It doesn't actually resolve anything. And it leaves the kid in the same place as this arrogant, abusive guy. And it seems to think that the most important reconciliation is between him and his terrible, abusive father who beats his mother. And we see her in the hospital with the father who has attempted to kill himself and failed. And she should not be there. She should have left him and gotten away from him. There's no indication that he's going to stop hitting her once he gets out of the hospital.
And also, plot-wise, he shouldn't have lived. It's more emotionally effective if he dies with the suicide attempt. But you're right. Like, he's been abusive and horrible the whole time. There'd be no reason for you to stay.
Right. And the kid also is abusive and horrible, and there's no reason for Apollonia to stay, or for that matter, for his band members to stay with him in his band. Wendy and Lisa have written this great song, as we've been told throughout the entire movie. They should leave. They should form their own group and leave him behind.
Now look, Josh, okay, you've missed the main relationship that had to be reconciled. It's Prince and Fame, okay? So, and in the end, Prince and Fame live happily ever after for the next few decades, right? But
right.
But no, look, yeah, I was very surprised from a screenwriting standpoint when he did slap Apollonia. I was like, ooh, and there's like there's no like you said, reconciliation or kind of like remorse for it. It just kind of happens, and then they move on. Like, yeah, I slapped her. She wanted to be in a girl group, like what?
Right.
She has dreams of her own, that crazy lady, And but I mean, so there are some confusing things, but even like there's some lazy things like Apollonia where are you from? And she's like, New Orleans. But I heard about this club, so I figured I'd come and make it here. And it's like, yeah, because there's no music scene in New Orleans, right? Like, so, and like I said, the dad's suicide, it should have just been a suicide. So those are the things that are infuriating. I agree with you. You don't think Prince is a good actor. I'm going to say Prince, when he talks, is not a good actor. Prince's eyes are amazingly expressive. I thought if they gave him no lines and just had his eyes do expressions the whole time and sing, like it would. This movie, I thought, like, who needed to direct this movie? Lin-Manuel Miranda, because then the whole movie would have been songs, and it would have been much better because they would have told the whole story in songs. And Prince is so much more emotive on stage that, like, I think it could have been so much better as a full-fledged beginning to end musical.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, I don't know if that would have completely, because the songs, I mean, as good as the songs are, if you like the Prince song, they're clearly good Prince songs. But I don't feel like the songs express the plot properly. And there are two instances where he sings a song that's meant to have relevance to the plot. And in both of those instances, I thought, this makes no sense. So there's a scene where he performs Darling Nikki, and Apollonia gets really mad at him. And I was not clear if she was mad because she thought the song was about her and about their like sexual relationship, and she didn't like him sharing that with everyone, or she thought the song was about some other girl that he'd been with and was mad that he was singing about some other girl in front of her. But either way, the song, which presumably was written independently and just put in the movie, it doesn't fit when it's required to move the plot along.
I thought it was about the former. I thought it was him singing about her to her face, while she's watching it and being embarrassed. And in that moment, it would fit. But I do understand your point that it needed some clarification and some weaving.
Yeah, I mean, it just it's very important because she gets so angry and she storms out. And then even Morris or Jerome, Morris's sidekick,
it was Jerome.
He says like, that wasn't cool what you did. And at that moment I was like, well, but what exactly did he do? Can you tell me, please?
But Jerome's kind of a fun character as a hanger-on who will just do anything for Morris Day.
He's the best.
Yeah. I've hitched my wagon to Morris Day, baby. That's it. So.
They have a kind of amusing dynamic. I mean, they're also terrible misogynists. They literally dump a woman in a garbage in a
I was gonna say I was not enjoying this movie until that scene, and then I was like, okay, I get what this movie is. Like,
but I mean, ridiculous. We're reconciling it in 2021 now, but it wasn't dudes who went alone to this movie. It was men and women, women who swooned over Prince, boyfriends and girlfriends. Like this, I guess throwing ladies in the dumpster if they like question where you were last night was cool in the 80s, and honestly, it was a simpler time. No, I don't know.
That's not cool.
I'm joking around, Josh. Clearly,
right. I realize that. But they do have kind of a fun comedy dynamic. They have that weird bit where they're doing like a who's on first routine. That was kind of funny, but it was just so random. Like, honestly, I'm just trying to find something that kind of entertained me about this movie. So there's that. But I want to go back to my previous issue with the songs that are meant to be relevant to the plot. So the big climax is that he performs Purple Rain, right? We've had this whole subplot throughout the movie where Wendy and Lisa wrote this song and he won't perform it. He won't even listen to it. And finally he acknowledges that and he's all sad because his father attempted suicide. And he gets on stage and he says, very seriously, I'm dedicating this song to my father. And then he sings Purple Rain, which is definitely not a song about your father. It is definitely a song about like romantic longing. And it just struck me as the song needs to fulfill this very basic plot function, and it fails. And not because it's a bad song, but because they just threw it in there without thinking about it.
I mean, really, it should have been dedicated to Wendy and Lisa because of all the stuff that he put them through. And then this is like, hey, you guys are right. You wrote an awesome song and let's play it. But okay. I mean, the song is so good. I mean, I guess what he's saying is like, I'm dedicating this to my father, who is also a very good musician, and I see that now, and I want to strive to be my best. And maybe I haven't in the past because I wouldn't let other people, influence me creatively, which is weird because from what I've read, like Prince, obviously we know was very into Prince, and some reports say like that's how he was. But at the same time, there are others that say like at this point in time, he was so receptive to other people's ideas and collaboration, and that's how so much of the music was made,
Well, it's interesting though, and I think kind of ironic that the whole storyline here is that Wendy and Lisa have written Purple Rain and he won't perform it. But in reality, or at least according to the credits,
Prince wrote it. Yeah.
Prince wrote Purple Rain, and Wendy and Lisa eventually left the Revolution because Prince would not listen to their ideas and they wanted to go solo. So it's sort of an ironic thing there.
Yeah. But how did that work out, Wendy and Lisa? They did fine as
it worked out
soundtrack.
fine.
They did all right
they're
as
doing
soundtrack artists. I'm just
and they're alive, and
so you're scoring Prince's death against. No, look here's a little background on Purple Rain, which is like if you argued it's the best rock song ever, I'd be like, that's a good pick. It was actually written as a country song. Prince wrote it for him and Stevie Nicks. And Stevie Nicks listened to it and just got kind of scared, like, of what it would take to do it. So she kind of backed away. And then at like a rehearsal one day, he started playing around with it. And then Wendy played those iconic chords. And then for the next 6 hours, the band just played it and turned it in from a country song into what we know it to be now. So, but Josh, that song peaked at number 2. Do you know what held it out as the number 1 single?
No, I didn't. I saw that there were 2 other songs from here that did make it to number 1, but what was number 1 over Purple Rain?
Yes, Wake Me Up Before You Go by Wham. So
I mean, that's a great song, and it's not 10 minutes long. So
this is what's so great about the podcast is you just defended Wake Me Up Before You Go over Purple Rain. Not that I'm against Wake Me Up Before You Go. I'm just not picking it over Purple Rain.
I mean, not that I love that song, but if I had a choice to listen to one of those 2 songs, I'm going to take that Wham song every time.
All right. Well, then I'm glad you're choosing life, Josh.
Yes.
The two songs that were number 1 were When Doves Cry and Let's Go Crazy. And Let's Go Crazy was number 1 when the album and the movie was also number 1. The album spent 24 weeks at number 1, man. So 122 weeks on the charts. So just wanted to get that in there. I know you don't like it, but too bad for you.
No, I mean, I can see the popularity of the music. I can see that how it would be popular. I'm less. I can't quite understand the appeal of the movie other than the music, other than just wanting to experience the music. But as a movie, this is straight up terrible.
It's not a very good movie, but side 2 of the album, Josh, you could argue is the greatest side 2 of any album. When Doves Cry, I Would Die for You, Baby, I'm a Star, Purple Rain. How are you gonna argue that one? So
yeah, like I said, I kind of like When Doves Cry. That's a catchy little song, but
and it has no bass line. Did you know that?
I didn't, but that's, I think one of the things that Prince is, clearly a musical genius and coming up with these things that I didn't notice, but obviously contributes to the appeal of that song and why it works. So, I mean, all credit to him on that, but I definitely don't want to listen to any Prince albums.
I like the beginning of When Doves Cry when it sounds like he's talking into an electric razor. Wow.
All sorts of creative stuff going on here. I do want to say Clarence Williams III, who is the only, I think, actor in this movie who is an actual actor.
Mod Squad.
Yeah. And he's still around. He's a major character actor for many, many years. And he plays the kid's dad. Like, it's not a good part and it's not well written, but he puts his all into that as an actor and does everything that he can to make you feel the real emotions of that.
The mom's a real actor, Olga, whatever her last name is.
Karlatos.
Yeah, she's from
right.
a lot of Italian horror movies. And I actually thought the dude who managed the club was a pretty good actor, the big fella.
Yeah, he might also be not a Prince associate. I mean, he doesn't have much of a part. But I mean, I think Clarence.
He's got that one scene, right, where he's like, "What the fuck are you doing? You're going to screw this up like your dad." Like, and I thought he did well with that scene.
Yeah, it's fine, I guess. But overall, I mean, the idea of Prince not only casting himself but casting everyone that he knows, and everyone that he works with musically, I don't know that was a great choice. I mean, it leads to the music, which is what's important. But in terms of caring about these characters and having an investment in their arcs, it just, it's a big failure.
No favorite Morris Day and the Time songs, Josh?
I don't know. What was their big hit?
Oh, there was 2. There was Jungle Love and The Bird.
Oh, yeah, I do know Jungle Love, I think. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that the songs are bad. It just kind of, it doesn't do it for me. But Morris Day clearly has a lot of charisma and stage presence also, and is a better actor than Prince. I mean, in part because he's just called upon to be goofy, and maybe if he had to be serious and emotional, he wouldn't be able to handle it. But being silly, he's he does okay with it.
Two fun facts. By the time this movie was released, Prince and Morris Day were no longer talking to each other. Hopefully they reconciled. But
I think they did.
This is one I thought was fun. The kid never says a word to Morris Day, and Morris Day only speaks 13 words to the kid throughout the whole movie. And that's the whole rivalry. Let's rate this thing, Josh.
Yeah, let's rate it out of 5 puffy shirts.
Sure, I was going to say purple motorcycles. So
there you go. That motorcycle is something too in this movie.
I mean, to me, it gets 2.5, and without the music, it might get a half. So, or 1.
Yeah. I give it 2 stars. Like I acknowledge the music, and some of it I enjoyed, but the rest of it is, and I like the costumes, the puffy shirts and all the other costumes. And as you mentioned, the use of color in the cinematography, some of that looks kind of cool. You know, it has this music video aesthetic that's appealing to look at. But
and the location shooting around Minneapolis, you know, I always like that stuff. I want to like this movie more, Josh, but you're not helping.
Yeah. Dave, what would you like to rate this?
So I have to say that my rating is based on a so bad it's good scale, because I had so much fun with this really, really bad movie. I'm giving it 3.5.
Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay. So the big Prince fan gives it a lower rating than the guy who says he never really cared for Prince.
That's right.
But did you notice
Amazing.
that Dave kind of looks like Dr. Dave from the Revolution?
Yeah, I was thinking, and then this goes to, of course, our long running discussion of Dave's resemblance to people, because when that guy first showed up on screen, for a second, I was like, was Weird Al in Prince's band?
Right.
And of course, Dave most looks like Weird Al.
Yeah,
so
right.
that all ties together.
That's right.
So we'll come back then in a moment and talk about the legacy of Purple Rain. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year in this special bonus episode of our season on the films of 1984. We've been talking about Prince's Purple Rain, which is not a great movie. And contrary to what Siskel and Ebert kind of expected, having seen this movie, and contrary to what other people might expect given how successful this movie was, Prince did not become a big movie star. He made a few more movies himself that he not only starred in, but also directed. And as Jason pointed out, Albert Magnoli, who directed Purple Rain, kind of ghost directed these films. But none of them were,
or at least one of them.
There, yeah, and but none of them were anywhere near the success of Purple Rain. He followed up with Under the Cherry Moon, and then Sign of the Times, which is mostly, I think, a straight up concert film. And then Graffiti Bridge, which is sort of a sequel to Purple Rain.
No, it's a sequel.
I haven't seen it, but I read references that called it sort of like a spiritual sequel or something like that. But it does feature the kid as the main character. Have you seen any of those?
Morris Day, no, but Morris Day is his rival.
Yeah.
And they're fighting over the clubs. So how is that not a sequel?
Okay, there you go. I haven't seen it. That wasn't my judgment. That was just based on some of the things that I read. But I don't want to see any of these movies.
Sounds like a reboot.
No.
Right. And I mean, that movie came out in 1990, which was a point where Prince was his popularity was going down a bit, and it, maybe could be looked at as a way for him to recapture the height of his popularity.
Well, again, it's dude, I mean, the height of where he was when this was out is one of those lightning bolt moments that you can't sustain for an entire career. No one can, right? So even in 1990, he's still playing, to major crowds and is a major draw. So, I mean, and that album is quite well regarded, the Graffiti Bridge album. So, it's the movie's maybe not the move for him.
No, obviously not. And after Graffiti Bridge came out in 1990, he had a career that went on for another 26 years, but he never attempted to make another movie. He never attempted to star in a movie that someone else was, he didn't get hired by some major director to play a part or anything like that. As opposed to, say, Madonna, who you mentioned as one of those, other stars on the same level, who really has, whether you think she's good at it or not, has sustained this parallel career as an actor sporadically throughout her career, starting in the 80s when she was at the height of her popularity there. And that's just not something that he did.
Yeah. And that, we don't know. He could have been offered 100 roles. He just might have turned them all down. So we don't know.
Right. That's true. Obviously, he decided, or, maybe it was a combination of not being offered is what he would want and his decision to focus on the music. And even if his career had ups and downs, obviously he was enormously popular and influential all the way up until his death in 2016, and created many more hits and is incredibly prolific. I mean, even now, I think supposedly there's vaults of hundreds of Prince songs that have never been released that are still waiting for the people to argue over his estate or whatever.
Right. And, that's akin to Springsteen and probably Dylan too, where they just have so much unreleased stuff. And and those are three very bootlegged artists as well because of what they do live. Purple Rain was the last song he ever played in Atlanta. Last number he played a week before he died. So that's sad. And after he died, this movie was shown on MTV and VH1 in tribute and also at AMC and Carmike theaters. So, I mean, it resonated, still to the day.
Right. And that was the thing, is that as soon as he died, that was the big tribute that people went to, was watching this movie or putting this movie out in theaters. And I remember when that happened, and not only did the theater show it, once or twice, right, the week of his death, but it played for weeks in these theaters after he died. So people were going to see it, I assume.
We missed it, Dave.
I know. I wish I had gone.
Yeah.
Hey, Josh, one studio executive recommended that Prince should be played by John Travolta.
I might have enjoyed that more. I mean, as we established in Saturday Night Fever, I guess maybe I feel like in 1984, Travolta was still in the right phase of his career. He could have done that. I mean, I don't know that would have been good because the only appeal of this movie is Prince. And if you put a different person in there, it would probably have focused even more on the terrible plot.
There's no movie without the Prince music and Prince performing the music. So get it.
I think we can agree, however, that John Travolta, as hammy as he is, or can be, is a better actor than Prince.
Sure. And Travolta's had many good performances.
Yeah.
So, Prince's Super Bowl halftime show is epic and many regarded as the greatest ever. I remember that. I was pretty blown away watching that one.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't watch it, but I remember when it happened and how really into that people were. And the Super Bowl halftime show is generally not something that's ever good. So
there's a few on the list, and it's the guys you would think. It's Prince, Springsteen, U2, Bruno Mars recently. So, it's the people who have reputations as great live performers.
And that's, it's not good in part because that's like an impossible task for people to put on a good performance in that tiny little time slot where they're busy setting up a stage in a couple minutes and the sound quality isn't great and you're in some football stadium and all that.
Right. And it's outdoors, which is there's a great story about, the Prince one, they rehearse all week and then it starts pouring rain. Like right before Prince goes, Purple Rain?
Yeah, sorry, I had to ask.
In a way it was, and I'll get to that, Josh. But so it's raining hard, and before he goes on, the director, who I think was Don Rio, calls him and he goes, Prince, it's, as you can see, it's pouring. Like, we're really worried about this. Is there anything we can do to make your performance easier? And he goes, and Prince thinks about it and he goes, yes. Can you make it rain harder? He's just, he's that cocksure of himself all the time. But he closed, if I'm not mistaken, he closed with Purple Rain and he's behind that purple veil and it's pouring and it's like everything worked because Prince is magic, So, yeah, I don't know, man. Other than that, the last fun fact I found, Josh, was there's an African language, Northwest Africa, called Tuareg. And the first film ever made in Tuareg was called, I can't pronounce, it's called Akunak Tedelat Tasha Tazugi. And it's a film homage to Purple Rain and The Harder They Come with guitarist Madhu Mokhtar.
And I think that movie is like Purple Rain is a showcase for this musician who is very famous in Africa, and they use kind of the structure of Purple Rain to as like an homage or as a tribute, but they use that as a showcase for this musician.
I think you're right.
Yeah, and I of course have. I mean, I don't know if that's available anywhere for us to see in the U.S., but I haven't seen it. I don't know that anyone really has. I looked it up on Letterboxd, and there were some reviews from in English from presumably from American or Western viewers, so it's available somewhere. But yeah.
And are those reviews mostly positive?
Well, they were fairly like, I think they were similar to this in that like the musician is, his music is great. Maybe the movie isn't, or people who are just fascinated with its reflection of the culture that they're not familiar with. But I did see one, and it was something like, and I'm just paraphrasing here, but it was something like, this movie wouldn't be anything if it weren't for the music, because the character is such a terrible asshole who treats everyone poorly. And then the person says, and they had never seen Purple Rain, and they said like, and then I went and watched Purple Rain, and if anything, Purple Rain is worse in that regard. So there you go.
Well, I mean, Purple Rain is a catchier title than the literal translation of this one. Red with the color of blue, or the sky with the color of blue with a little red in it.
Yeah, a little
rain. I think
a
it's
literal translation that doesn't quite
little red in it.
Doesn't quite fly.
Hey, Josh.
Yes.
Have you ever seen a movie that used more fog machines?
The Fog, John Carpenter's The Fog, maybe.
About it.
There's a lot of fog.
There is a lot, which is the 1980s music video aesthetic. Apollonia, I mean, this was like, I think, meant to be a big launch pad for Apollonia's career, and that didn't really go anywhere. There was one Apollonia 6 album and an Apollonia solo album, and she's acted very occasionally on TV and stuff, but
I think she's like a manager, right? Doesn't she manage like young actors now?
I mean, I'm sure she's doing okay, but she certainly didn't become the superstar. I think, Prince throughout his career was big on these proteges, and I don't know that he ever really launched any of them into the level of superstardom.
Sheila E. got very popular.
Yeah, but compared to Prince, Sheila E. is a footnote.
Right, but I mean, Sheila E. and Morris Day would probably be the two, I'd say, And Morris Day was more of a collaborator.
Right. And Morris Day is still around. He performs. He's big on the nostalgia circuit. He performs here in Las Vegas a lot and actually used to live here for a while, although not anymore. But I mean, he's still definitely somebody that you would go see at like a casino in Connecticut or something like that. And I'm sure he puts on a good show.
You know who goes to see Morris Day a lot, Josh? Jay and Silent.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. We're big fans of Morris Day. And I assume Kevin Smith is. And that's why he ended up as a reference in there. Wendy and Lisa, as I implied, not only still alive, but also still working steadily. And they do a lot of like film and TV composing, which is interesting. Right. You'll see their name come up in the credits a lot, but they've also put out their own albums as a duo. And The Revolution as a band reunited after Prince's death and was touring.
Yeah, they played here in Vegas. They played at Brooklyn Bowl.
There you go. Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, obviously all of that is on hiatus at the moment, but maybe they'll come back. And that includes, I think, all of the people who are in the band in this movie, with the exception, of course, of Prince. But Wendy and Lisa, as well as all the rest of them, were part of that reunion. And finally, Albert Magnoli. This was, again, kind of a big break for him theoretically, but he didn't do much as a director after this other than working with Prince, and made a couple of low profile films, but hasn't had any directing credits since like the late 90s. So,
oh, no. I marked down two classics. American Anthem with Mitch Gaylord, Olympic gymnast, when, in the 80s, you were like, hey, you won an Olympic gold medal? Let's make a movie about your sport, and Tango and Cash.
Right, which he's not credited with, but showed up as a replacement for the original director. But again, those are both, I think, right after or soon after this, and then he just didn't sustain that directing career. So my point being that Prince is such an all-consuming egotist that even when he attempts to launch other people's careers, he overshadows them.
Look, I just want to mention the other two members of the Revolution, Brown Mark and Bobby Z, who we already mentioned, Dr. Fink and Lisa and Wendy. Apparently there was a scene cut from this film where Lisa and Wendy were kissing because they were in a relationship at the time. And I mentioned Stevie Nicks. It's got to be tough when you got to you're in relationships and out of relationships with your band members and collaborators, and you still have to constantly collaborate.
Right. Well, Wendy and Lisa seem to have done that well because their romantic relationship ended a long time ago, but they've remained artistic partners to this day. So they did better. They did better at it than Stevie Nicks and the various members of Fleetwood Mac, I think.
Well, and like you said, and Prince was involved with probably, Vanity and Apollonia and Carmen Electra at one point, all these protege of him.
Yeah, well, I think that was one of the things is that he would find some hot chick that he wanted to date and then decide that she was going to become a singer. And then when he broke up with her, her career would suddenly mysteriously be over. How did that happen?
Man, Josh, you really don't know.
I mean, look, even if you think his music is great, you could acknowledge that he's this terrible egotist and an asshole who probably mistreated people. I mean, that's almost any great musician, unfortunately.
Well, he's also, look, I'm going to take, obviously, I don't know his personal life, but if I was going to take the counterpoint, he's also known for, giving to charity and doing a lot of good things too.
Yeah, good for him. I mean, and certainly his personal behavior is not as bad as some, I mean, as far as we know, he didn't beat his girlfriends like the kid does. I hope not, but that's not something, like, it's sad to say, but I mean, hey, James Brown and Little Richard, for example, who are people that are cited in that Gary Arnold review, in their personal lives, probably behaved worse than Prince.
I don't know that Little Richard had girlfriends, Josh. So I'm not going to say that he beat.
Well, right, but
James Brown, we know, was arrested.
Yeah. I'm just saying that these personality flaws, let's say, are not uncommon, and I'm not trying to pretend that Prince is the only person who has them.
But we also don't want to, throw allegations out there without.
No, you're right. But I think Little Richard has definitely had some dubious behavior. So my point not being not to insult Little Richard, but just to point out that it doesn't diminish his musical talent.
Here's a fun fact. The VHS of this film was released while the film was still in theaters.
Wow.
That is a fun fact.
I mean, dude, how big of a movie is it if it's still playing in
and especially because
theaters?
At that time, now it's not the case. I mean, it kept shrinking, but at that time, a VHS wouldn't come out until many months or maybe a year or more after a movie was released in theaters. So a very successful film that sucks.
One more legacy bit.
Yeah.
The Chappelle Show sketch, which I think was very influenced by the movie itself and led to, I think, a bit of his resurgence later on in his career.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
Not just him. Fred Armisen did a great impression of
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Too. Yeah, I mean, and his ability, as you're saying, Jason, to have a sense of humor about himself, if not in this movie, but in general. I remember when he had a cameo on New Girl, I think it was, and people were endeared by that because he was just kind of acting goofy. So he was able to have a sense of humor about himself, just not at the height of his career.
Yeah. I'm bummed that he's dead. I wish he was still around, and it would have been really cool to see what he could still do.
I'm sure he would have continued creating some amazing stuff had he lived, and would have enjoyed listening to this episode of Awesome Movie.
Not so much.
He would not have.
Wait, I'm breaking in, guys. We left out one super fun fact.
Oh, more fun facts.
When Tipper Gore heard Darling Nikki, it was like her kid who was listening to it at the time was like 11. That's what incited her to start the Parent Music Resource Center, which tried to censor a bunch of music in the 80s. So there you go.
That's definitely not a positive legacy for this film, but speaks to the power of Prince's sexual energy, I guess.
He sexes you with his eyes.
So that's Purple Rain. And that is this special bonus episode of Awesome Movie Year. And thank you if you're listening to this on Patreon. If you're one of our 6, I think, patrons, we appreciate it. And if you're listening to this much later, we still appreciate you. And check us out on social media.
Oh, we are on social media, Josh. As you know, that is a true thing. I am Jason Harris Comedy on Facebook and Instagram. Jay Harris Comedy on Twitter. Go for Jason.com. Needs a slap in the face like Apollonia got in. Never mind.
just quit while you're ahead.
The character. I'm joking about the character, not in real life. Guys.
Sure.
And Josh, you are at number1princefan.com.
No.
Oh, no. We're at awesomemovieyear.com. Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram. Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter.
I'm at joshbellhateseverything.com, where I did write about this movie a number of years ago when I was doing a whole series of posts on rock movies, and you can read more about why I think it sucks on that site. Also, Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook and at Signal Bleed on Twitter. And you can listen to our producer, David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. And you can also follow us on social media at Piecing Pod and join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces.
So thank you for checking us out on Patreon if you have, by David Rosen. And thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.